Hello, Labake. I'm delighted to see you again. It's been a while. Omolabake Fakunle. And we have a shared interest in, well, a whole range of things, but in particular, the student voice and employability. And that's how we originally got in touch. But it's really nice to see you today.
Oh, the pleasure is all mine, Elspeth. Thank you so much for having this conversation with me.
So let's. I like the way that you're in your writing and your studies. You've been looking at internationalization, employability. You've been looking at particularly master's level students, and
Yeah.
you investigated 5 different universities in the UK, which are heavy recruiters of international students.
That's
And
right.
I found it really
Yeah.
interesting that you said, paradoxically, international student mobility is the most visible aspect of internationalization, while students' voices are the least heard in internationalization related discourses. And I think that's it's a good quote, and it's a good place to start. Do you still think that's true?
Yes, I still think that's true, actually. And when I wrote that, it's just because you see so much written about international student mobility. We have all this data. We have the numbers of students growing from the global south to the global north. Every country aspires to recruit more international students. And this is reflected in what we read and the data we have access to. But then this begs the question, what about the students? What are they feeling? What do they think? So we have all these massive surveys that tells us, yeah, the numbers, it's decreasing, it's declining. We don't need numbers of the different countries, but there is less about the student voice.
Mm.
And when I talk in this case about the student voice, I'm not really relating it to, discourses around student experience in terms of culture shock, in terms of how they struggle to adapt or adjust to the learning environment. I'm talking more about their underpinning rationales and motivations to study abroad.
Mm.
Why don't we know so much about what motivates them rather than what is framed within this broader discourse of, say, the push-pull model,
Mm.
or just saying they are moving from one country to another?
Mm.
And we lose the student voice in this quantification
Mm.
of data on
Mm.
student mobility.
Yeah, and I think that quantification, as you say, it's actually all around the world, isn't it? I think universities find it very easy to measure student numbers and sources of different countries that students come from. So that's why we tend to get stuck with those. But I think I love the way you said student voices are deafeningly silent in policy documents of these universities. Well, probably all universities in fact, but I think that's true probably not only for international students, but all students. I think we don't listen to students enough. Um, but again, I mean, have you seen any change since you started looking into this? Do you think it's getting better?
Oh, I am not sure it's getting better. I think there is so much room, so much work that needs to be done in this area. And that's simply because when you look at also the quantification is the basis of selecting those universities that I looked at. So these are the top recruiting. They are the most international. But looking at their internationalization strategies developed within the last decade, you do not find student input. It's more still of a top-bottom positioning. It's more about what they do rather than what the students are bringing or what the students are doing, or to what extent the student experience have underpinned the creation of these strategies or the selection of these policies.
Mm.
And then we do not know to what extent students are faring, whether for the better. And I think that's also problematic in the sense that obviously, you go to university for a transformative experience, and by far and large, most students do have this transformative experience. But when it is lost in the quantified data,
Mm.
then how do we make it known that internationalization is doing so much good?
Mm.
you know, and we then talk about difficulties with embracing internationalization because we have not humanized the discourses.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, the usual story that they're counting the numbers and not looking at the outcomes of the student experience. So how would you see that institutions would do that to incorporate student voices better into their policies and strategies?
Well, if I can be a little bit tongue-in-cheek, I would start by saying it's not by pasting their photos into the institutional documents. That says nothing. Visualizing students of different colors, for example, doesn't really tell us to what extent that interculturality is happening within the university campuses. So it is maybe to some extent using research on student experience to inform policy. For example, my PhD looked at student rationales and their experience of studying in a UK university. And that shows to some extent discrepancies in their experiences depending on the school where they are. So it's about shared practices. It's about creating employability development opportunities, if I go to that aspect of my research, that students can enjoy simply by being in a university. It should not be determined only by working in a particular school. So there's this silo effect where
Yeah.
you have a school that's embraced a lot of innovative approach to education, and that's happening. But for a student just 2 minutes walk down, the campus, they've not even heard of it.
Mm.
So this is, I think my passion for my research really is because the university is giving so much. There is just so much.
Mm.
I remember when I first came to study in the UK, I was like a kid, in a candy shop with the books, with the reading. And it is a shame if a student passes through that system and do not enjoy these benefits.
Mm. And I think you said that the result is that the policies and strategies don't really take into account the needs and objectives of the international students, which I'm sure is a really key point. And you said, another quote from you: "Student mobility viewed through an organisational lens does not capture mobile students' viewpoints." So starting from the organisation rather than
Yes.
starting from the students is going to always have that effect, I guess.
It will indeed.
Mm.
It will indeed.
Mm.
And maybe because also my background is business. So I did 2 degrees in business before coming into education. I know about strategic planning. I know why this is very important.
Mm.
And this is critical, to sustainability in universities.
Mm.
But at the same time, when you look at the student experience, and that is not informing the policies. For example, let's look at the economic rationale for internationalization. From the organizational point of view, it's about bringing in the student. It's about the numbers. It's about, this is a very profitable business, and we cannot shy away from that. From the student point of view, there is the expectation that when you get an international education, it enhances your employability. So the economic rationale goes both
Both
ways for
ways.
the organization,
Yeah.
the student. But at the same time, when we know about all these benefits for institutions, what about support? What about loans for international students? What about the scholarship? To what extent? I think it would be amazing if an institution can put in their internationalization strategy that we have recruited so number of international students, and 5% of the fees from the students is being plowed to education in, for this group of international students who are very able, but are not capable of paying these high tuition fees. Now, when you put that, it kind of reflects the economic rationale, which could be a problem for some international students. They are the brightest, they are the best, but they don't have the financial capability.
Yeah. And you mentioned economic rationale. We should point out that your 4 frames for understanding the students' rationales for study abroad are educational, experiential, aspirational, and economic. So you broke down the push-pull factors more. Just going back to the fact that it's master's level, you and I have discussed before whether it's, is there a difference between master's level and undergraduate level in terms of listening to the student voice and what their needs are. Um, One of the things, of course, is that the duration of the course is much shorter, but you also were talking about on the aspirational side where they go next in terms of, you know, what next, whether it's more education or employability or employment.
Yes. So for undergraduate students, for example, there are several factors that influence reasoning for, studying in a university. They want to get a job, but for some of them, the aspiration after getting that degree would be to go on to postgraduate study, do a master's level study. But for master's students who've already gotten maybe the undergraduate degree, they've already worked in some cases for a couple of years, they don't necessarily want to do a PhD. So what do we do with them? We really need to be concerned about their employability and supporting these students. And if we listen, universities listen to the student voices and allow research into student experiences to inform the strategic development of policies, then that can be a case that these students will be looked at and opportunities will be crafted for them during their study, which is short, especially in the UK.
Yeah.
It's just 1 year. So it takes a very, very short period of time. And you just have to still do something. We can't say because it's a short period of time, then we do nothing because they are matured students, they know what they're doing. In most cases, maybe not. And the onus lies on the universities to put in strategies to support students throughout. And as you rightly pointed out, for undergraduate students, maybe in Scotland, they've got 4 years to figure it out. So maybe the first year, you can kind of, get along. Second year, you have the time. For master's students, you don't have the luxury of time.
Yeah.
And then, what do universities do? I don't know. I shouldn't be posing questions to you, but it's just an area where there is such a huge gap in our understanding, and we need to know more. And by using these 4 frames in terms of the educational, as a lot of people have already written, several research has been done in this area, students are mostly satisfied with their educational experiences abroad. But there are some aspects, for example, access. When we talk about their education, we can only talk about this because they have scaled through the hurdles, say, of visa application, and they are within the institution.
Yeah.
But do we hear about the stories of the several students who are denied entry based on one reason or the other?
Yeah. Well,
So if we
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that, you've talked about the economic side of things, and there's so many students who don't get the opportunity to study abroad at all. But I think your point about for universities to listen much more to students while they have them, use the resource, find out more about their needs and requirements, build it into strategy and policy. And not only international students either. I think it's really important. But I'm just going to end on a final personal note, because I know your husband works away and you have done your PhD, and you now work with 4 young daughters that you brought up while you were doing your PhD. And I think it's a fantastic encouragement to other people who want to study to follow your lead. So it's great. And thank you very much for talking to me today, Labake. That was really interesting.
Oh, thank you so much, Esbel. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Look forward to seeing you again soon.